All aboard and welcome to another animation station. We're finally rolling along with some more episodes this year, and we're starting off the year with a big old movie. We're talking about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which just squeezed in at the end of last year, so we did not have time to talk about it beforehand. I am, of course, Sparkz Witty, and I'm joined by Brandon T. McClure, and we are going to be diving in on DreamWorks' latest film, and I'm super excited to do it. Brandon, how are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to watch this movie. Not to watch this movie, to talk about this movie. I'm a little tired today, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to talk about what is probably one of, if not my favorite movie of 2022.
Sure. Favorite movie? The top movie.
Look, after watching it the second time,
What
I was like,
your top movie? I don't remember. What was your top movie last year?
"This is Glass Onion."
I don't know about that. This is a really good movie. I don't know if it's. We'll see.
This one hit me, and look, Glass Onion is a brilliant movie, and all that would happen is that Glass Onion would just become third. I wouldn't rearrange my whole list. But man, this movie hits me right in the heart place.
I think it's really, really good. We'll get into the whys and everything.
Well, let's get into it, Sparkz. I'm ready.
Okay. I mean, obviously, I think we'll get it right out of the way. It's the thing everyone knew from the trailer was going to be good was the animation.
Yes.
The animation is fantastic. It's so refreshing to see. Bad Guys showed it off that they were doing these changes, this adapting of 2D into 3D. As we've talked about many times on and off the air, the effect of Spider-Verse to create things like Arcane. And the blend that is occurring is wonderful to see. So DreamWorks going in that direction is a big thing. I think it's far more noticeable when it's taking the IP of something that already existed, how drastically refreshing it is to see this animation, because you can look at Puss in Boots in his own previous film or in the other Shrek films, and this is so stunningly better.
And not just better, but I think his character model also benefits from this new animation style in a way that I didn't quite realize he needed. Because I rewatched the first Puss in Boots after I watched this film for the first time, and I like Puss in Boots design. I always have, but this kind of photorealistic, a way that they were trying to animate the Shrek franchise and just 3D animation in general was it's a little weird looking back on it, that this was just, they tried to be like, what if a cat looked like a cat but on two legs? And we're all like, yeah, that's kind of cute. But this one, being able to stylize it in kind of a 2D blend, really makes that character design pop, I think.
I think a lot of what that is this desire at the time when Shrek and everything was popular, right? Mm-hmm. That these movies were not like Disney and Pixar movies. They were not being made for just children. They wanted to grab an adult audience too.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to make them feel like it's not a cartoon in a basic term, right? They wanted you to feel like this is not a child's cartoon. You're watching something that's made for you. Yeah. And so the photorealism, that kind of like effect on the 3D, I think stems from that not so great idea that like animation is a lesser medium. So you got to like doll it up to look more adult in a term. Sure. Is what I think the photorealism part comes into. Like they didn't want it to look too cartoony. Like this looks more cartoony than that does, but it's better. It looks better.
Yeah, I think he's behind you on the screen there, and I think his character model it works as a. I mean, this is going to be really weird to say because he's not a 2D character, but it feels like you're watching a 2D character almost, because he acts and he moves and he interacts with the environment as a 2D character would, as you would come to assume one would in a 2D animated film or show. Like he puts, at one point he's holding the map and then he puts it in his cape and it just disappears, and then that's just where it is. You don't expect that from a 3D animated film, because everything for so long we try to have everything interact with its space as normal, whereas in a movie like this it doesn't matter. That's what you would do in a 2D film, so we'll just do it here. It's a cartoon after all.
Right, yeah. It's unafraid and unashamed to be animated.
Yes.
And I think that's a striking thing. I think the other thing that lends to that is the very beginning of the film that says the story is a fairy tale, and this very much is a fairy tale, and they're not afraid to be a fairy tale either. They're not afraid to just be earnest and sincere in the emotions of the characters and what they're doing and the story of it. There's not as much of the typical Shrek style joke parody format here.
Yeah.
To the film's benefit, I think that was more entertaining at the time than it is today.
Yeah, I think so too. I do often think that the meta-ness of the Shrek franchise is probably not at home in today's filmic atmosphere, which is probably why they struggled in the later Shrek films and why they just decided to kind of be like, you know what, let's not keep going with that. Because even with Shrek 4, people were starting to rub against it. Now, admittedly, Shrek 3 and 4 are not as well written as the first two, but I do think that was the style of Shrek was just kind of getting old hat at that point. Now we'll talk about it, but I do think there's a Shrek 5 on the horizon, and I'm very curious about what that's going to look like.
Right, or at least a Shrek film.
Yeah.
Will it be Shrek 5 or will it be actually Shrek 3? Who knows? Who knows, right. Friend?
Are we going to ignore Shrek 3 and 4?
Hey man, Shrek deserves a Superman treatment.
Shrek deserves a H2O treatment.
Yeah, this would be his Superman Returns.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is only a sequel to Shrek 1 and 2. Don't worry about it.
I'd be okay with that.
I'd be so okay with that. I'd be beyond relieved about that.
And the thing is, like, so clearly, like, we're Shrek fans. We both really like the first two Shrek films. I really like Puss in Boots a lot. I don't remember. I think you were a little colder on Puss in Boots than I was. The first Puss in Boots.
Yeah, I mean, like, in not in a harsh sense. I just thought it was pretty all right.
Yeah,
and it's been a while since I saw it. Like, there are some high highs, but it's an overall, like, it's there. It's not doing a lot with the character of Puss at the center of it.
And I think this film is leagues better. And you said it to our friend co-host of the Pickner podcast as well, Ryan, that that you think this is better than all of them.
Yes, I would. If I were to rank them, I would put this above all the Shreks and the previous Puss in Boots.
Yeah, and I don't think that's I think that's not just because of the animation, which is stunning. It is because it's so earnest in its approach to the character of Puss in Boots. It's taking a character that came from the Shrek franchise and really going into him of what it's a tale about coming to terms with your own mortality and things like that. And it does have references to the first Puss in Boots, and there is even a mention of Shrek that we see in a flashback. Like we'll see his mother from the first Puss in Boots give him the boots, and that's all really cool. But you don't need that foundation. The film also stands on its own as just a good fairy tale movie.
Yes, absolutely, I agree. I think that there's an amount where this is one of the reasons, because we're kind of talking around the whole Shrek thing right now. So I'll say, like, where I think this is better than the first one is because, again, I don't think that Puss has a real character arc, a real one in the original film. It's admittedly been a while, so you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's as core to that film. I think that's a fun film regardless of that. But, like, even Shrek 1 and 2 have these emotional arcs for the characters, which makes me think that they actually hold up as films, whereas both Shrek 3 and 4 are pretty vapid in that case.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this is so good, is because this, again, also has a very clear and simple, but very, very true arc for Puss. And that puts it on the level with Shrek 1 and Shrek 2 to me.
This is a really good example of a simple and predictable story executed incredibly well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wouldn't say this film is unpredictable. There's one thing that I didn't guess that we'll get into, but I pretty much knew where every character was going to end at the end of this movie. But that doesn't matter, because the journey that this movie takes you on is so well executed. It's a masterclass in executing predictable storylines, I think.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it plays with the fact, I think it was so smart for them to open the film and say this is a fairy tale. Not in a sense where it says, like, this is a lesser story or anything, but just saying, like, please just enjoy this fairy tale.
Yeah.
Like, we're not trying to super duper impress you. We're not going for like, we want to be lauded for our story craftsmanship, like a Inside Out or a Wall-E.
Yeah.
We just want to tell you this fairy tale, and if you ride with us, I think you'll have a good time. And I think that's true. The story is worthwhile. It's very full of heart. It's just also very simple and very clear. And I don't think that's a problem.
And there's so many moments in this movie that I just cried. There's a moment where where a character says, like, we saw this together recently with our friend Michael and your wife. I almost said fiance. Sorry, your wife and her sister. And we were there's a moment where one character goes, "Oh man, I'm beginning to cry," and I just turned to Michael and just go, "Me too."
Yeah, it's got a lot of good stuff in it. I will say, because you were talking about like the predictability of it, I think there was a lot that, like, there's a fair amount I could have figured from the trailers, but I want to give credit where credit's due. The role I thought that Goldie and the Three Bears were essentially going to fill for the film, or at least Goldie specifically, that ended up being played by a character they hid from the trailers, which is Jack Horner.
Yes, that's true. That's right. Jack Horner isn't in the trailers.
No, he's a character reveal in the film, and I was really surprised. And I thought it was very smart to hide him. Not because, like, oh, it's a big reveal thing, but like it was an extra layer that, like, when Jack Horner first shows up in the early part of the film, I thought he was going to be there until they stole from him, and that would be the end of it.
Yeah.
But he's not. He is the main overarching antagonist for the movie. And I did not expect that.
Yeah, and I think he plays a good role for the movie. Like we talked about when we first saw the trailer, that you said that, Goldilocks wants everything to be just right. What does that mean? What does that mean? And Jack Horner ends up being this character who's like, I just want all the magic, and he's evil for evil's sake, which is actually a little refreshing to see. Like, there's no tragic backstory. There's no altruistic motivation that he can see in his mind. He is evil, and he knows it.
He's privileged power.
Yeah,
that feels like on some level he wasn't privileged. So, like, you're right that there isn't a tragic backstory, but Horner thinks there's a tragic backstory.
Right.
And there isn't. He's blinded by his own privilege.
Right, because so we get a sense of,
I'm simply owed this. Doesn't that make sense?
Because he has anger of the fact that he comes from a nursery rhyme and not a fairy tale.
Right.
Because they make the sense like, well, that fairy tale about the pies, I was just a nursery rhyme, and he's like really angry about that.
Right.
So he feels like he's owed magic in a sense because he lives in a world of fairy tales where he was just a nursery rhyme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the execution of Jack Horner is really, really good, honestly. The only qualm I have with the movie also involves Jack Horner, which we've talked about before, but what it is that I think John Mulaney's doing a great job. I think he's playing, as far as the character is written in the script, pitch perfect. I think he's great in the role. The character model does not match John Mulaney's voice. And true. 80% of the time it's weird. To me personally, I think that I just would have changed the model a bit because John Mulaney's voice doesn't quite look right coming out of the character that they designed. And I would have changed it a bit. This is mostly about his size and his stockiness, but it's a little bit about his face.
I'll admit to not 100% seeing what you see in that, but I will admit to, in the beginning that we first see him, being taken aback that this character model was John Mulaney, because he has a very distinct voice, and you immediately recognize it as John Mulaney, because I like him as a voice actor, but he's never put on a different voice to disguise who he is. And so when he shows up, I was taken aback, but I think what happened was that I just kind of got used to it more than anything else.
Yeah, and I didn't let go of it. I couldn't get over the fact that I'm like, you knew it's not like you designed this character and then got John Mulaney's voice. Like, Not like the final version design. You had John Mulaney's voice and you designed this character around it, and I'm like, I would have made different choices. This doesn't totally work.
Yeah, maybe trim the face a little or something.
There's just things that could have been done differently, because to me that initial like jarring sensation never quite left, of like, John Mulaney's voice just doesn't quite feel like it should be coming out of the mouth of this particular person, even though I think he's exactly right for the role. That's the thing. And so it's all about appearance. It's just the appearance of the character. It just doesn't, it's rare that this ever happens in animation. But it just didn't.
I think you're absolutely right. You know, there's a to kind of spin what you're saying into, just kind of pick up the positive plum out of what you were saying, because you said that he is right for the role, and his voice is very good for this version of Jack Horner. He is very smug. He's very high and mighty. He's very much kind of aloof in his own evilness, and that is all things that John Mulaney plays really well.
Yeah.
The Serpent Sisters are introduced. They, what do I want to say about this? His, keeping on Jack Horner, his trophy room is a mishmash of all sorts of things, of baby unicorn horns and the glass slipper from Cinderella, and
probably the most Shreky thing about the movie is his collection of fairy tale things, just because that also feels how Shrek would play fast and loose with just like quick references to things.
Yeah, because
I think it's more purposeful here, but it is very much like everything in the kitchen sink that we can throw here.
Yeah, and I think you said something really interesting, that everything is more purposeful there, because almost everything that we see him use from that trophy room, almost everything that we see in that trophy room, he uses as a weapon later in the movie.
Right.
There's very little that we don't see just outright used later in the movie, and I think only because it was destroyed when the bears just crashed through the thing.
Right.
And I think this film also is able to use, going back to, like, you know, maybe the Shrek films, you know, nowadays the sensibilities of the Shrek films isn't necessarily needed, but like, I think this film is able to use what those sensibilities were of the references, of the Fast and Loose references of different fairy tales, to its strength, and not necessarily just as a joke.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Kind of moving on to some other parts of the film. Someone who really fits their character model exactly for the voice is Wagner Moura, who plays the wolf, Death.
Baby. Baby.
His voice is perfect for exactly what they gave him in visuality. The most striking part of the movie in sense of style and animation is probably the appearances of the wolf. So
I could gush all day about just him, because like, I think he's the best villain that the Shrek franchise has ever created, and certainly up there, in my opinion, this is all my opinion, up there with some of the best Kung Fu Panda villains.
I honestly, I'll go a step beyond, and I'll say, like, he's probably one of the best film iterations of Death. I think like, you can be nitpicky and go about live action versus animation and put down animation and that kind of thing, but the thing is that what they're doing, just like isolating everything down to just how Death appears in this movie, is so thematically in line at all times. It's so thoughtful. It's so very much like you should and could figure out he's Death pretty quickly before Puss does. And it's because they're constantly thinking about, like, what does it mean for him to be the presence of Death? How he affects Puss, how his whole demeanor works, how they're probably one of the most defining scenes is the one where he shows up in the crowd and he picks up the coins and puts them on his eyes and points at Puss. Like, the thoughtfulness that went into that to signify that he is in fact Death, I think is so good, and that they utilize everything about what that means to introduce this character chasing down Puss in Boots right to every level. They really think about, like, what are we doing and how can we make, like, not just small references of the why we're doing this, but like really tie it in to feel like it's right. And so having this motivation of him not being a cat person because he thinks the idea of 9 lives is absurd, and that it bothers him when people don't appreciate the life they're given. I think that's super, super good. Just a wonderful concept. Like you can apply everything that is this character, this idea of death, to any story about death, and all these things would feel accurate as a depiction of death himself.
Yeah, there's so many things I want to talk about with him. First off, I just want to say the voice actor's name again.
Wagner Moura.
Ragnar Mora. This is his first voice role, and he kills it. He kills it. He is incredible as this character. The character when he shows up with the whistle is chilling. As you start to see him closing in on Puss. Now this is the only thing I didn't catch in the movie. I pretty much called most of this movie how this movie was going to play out, with the exception of him, because I didn't expect that they would use the Grim Reaper in a Shrek movie.
Sure.
And to be fair, like in the trailers, we're just led to believe, oh, it's the big bad wolf.
I have to be honest with you, that was never the assumption I made, but I won't say I immediately jumped to the assumption of death either.
Yeah.
I think I was more living in the space for a while of he's a bounty hunter.
Yeah.
That's the same assumption that Puss makes, is kind of what I was thinking. He's someone who is trying to collect on the reward on Puss, and he's just good at it.
And I just thought that maybe in the Shrek universe, the big bad wolf was we met the big bad wolf in the Shrek franchise.
That's what I was going to say, is we've met the big bad wolf, and this is not the big bad wolf.
Right, you're right. So like I completely forgot about that. So I just assumed, oh, they made the big bad wolf a bounty hunter. That's cool. Whatever.
Right. Not only is the big bad wolf a far more of a homebody than this character, he's already an ally of the Shrek folk.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was not going to be him.
Anyway, but so like,
I don't blame you for that not being in your brain.
Well, because I haven't seen Shrek in years.
Yeah, absolutely.
But seeing this character, when he shows up in the bar, and he puts his name, it's a sign here, and he's tapping on the dead lettering, and like everything that you think about afterwards, like when you see the title cards when Puss is going through his death, it's bordered by sickles and wolf heads. Apparently, he's there when Puss dies. He's in a back alley when Puss dies by the bell. So so it's to imply that he was actually there every single time that Puss died, right, watching it happen. Incredible character.
Right. And he's supposed to, that's the thing I love, is that like death is supposed to, like, he's intimidating and scary and he does his job, but he's supposed to just kind of be there to collect you.
Yeah.
And he's breaking his own rules here because he loathes people like Puss, especially cats, but in general, who have lived their lives thinking they're immortal and wasting it on selfishness. And I think it was such a smart turn to do for Puss as well, because nothing in Puss in Boots' history in the Shrek films ever broke that idea of Puss. Like Puss is a super cool character, super entertaining, very stylish, very fun to watch. But I think the big reason that, again, like the first film doesn't really stand out to me is because Puss is just as developed there as he is in the Shrek films.
Yeah.
He's not more than that. And this puts more than that behind him.
Yeah, because what we're doing here with Puss through death is talking about how Puss bought into his own legend, like hardcore. He became this, he was like, oh, I have 9 lives. I can do whatever I want. I'm fearless. I'm never going to die. I'm the greatest. He was modeled. The reason why they cast Antonio Banderas is because he's modeled after Antonio Banderas' Zorro, but he's that on steroids.
Right. Yes.
And it's really cool to see Antonio perform this role now his 5th time as Puss.
Yes.
I believe. And he And I think he delivers one of the most nuanced voice acting performances as the character, because he admittedly he's given more to do in this movie, but because of that, Antonio I think is incredible in this movie.
No, I agree with you. I think he's really great in this movie. I'm really glad he has this, because whether or not there is more DreamWorks stuff to be done in the Shrek verse, and he'll be back, um, I can still treat this in my mind as kind of a send off of the character, and I think it was a very good one,
Yeah.
because my opinion aside about how we should revere Antonio Banderas' Zorro in our pop culture, it's not something where we're ever gonna probably see him get the proper send off of that character.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately it had one sequel and it wasn't good.
God.
And so because of that, it doesn't have the lasting power I think that it deserves as a role for Antonio Banderas, because he deserved a greater legacy attached to that character,
I agree.
for what he was doing with it, and he should have gotten a last hurrah as that character that was like really great. But the fact that he can get it for Puss in Boots, I think, is wonderful.
It's not too late.
It's not too late, but it is unlikely.
I know. I'd love to see him return for another Zorro movie and basically do the Mask of Zorro, but the roles reversed. Now he's the old man Zorro.
See here, I will say, like, here's the thing about that. I don't want them to just do the Mask of Zorro again, though. For him,
Yeah.
I wish that wasn't where we were. That's kind of all that's left. It would have to be. I wish we had gotten an actual full Zorro last venture of his.
Yeah.
That is his. And it is too late. That's not going to happen. You're right that if they did another, it's him passing the baton again.
Yeah, I agree. Like, we're both fans of Zorro, specifically, and The Mask of Zorro is an incredible movie that we're both huge fans of. And it's a bummer that we just only got The Legend of Zorro after that. And it just sucks that was it.
For sure.
Anyway, we're talking about Puss in Boots.
We are, and I'm very glad that Antonio Banderas has it, because I think he deserves it. I think this character is, for better or worse, more present for him in the pop culture mindset. So for him to get to have this really solid outing with the character, where he gets to fully put a lot of heart into him, matters a lot.
And there's so much nuance to just his voice performance alone. There's an incredible scene that a lot of people are highlighting, and actually it's actually thanks to, I don't like throwing things that I haven't seen under the bus, but it's actually thanks to Velma that a lot of people have been highlighting the scene, and it's the one where he's having the panic attack.
Hey, you know what? Since you brought it up, like, this is an animation station, so Velma, I'm grateful for it, for just the fact that, like, so many people dislike it so much that they're highlighting the good of other things, whether that be Cool Scooby-Doo or the scene that's in this, which I kind of wish I didn't know about before the movie, but I did because of that discourse.
Yeah.
But they're right. They're right.
Right. Like, and that scene is really good, because a lot of it's a really good lead up. There's a really good lead up to it, because there's Puss, who's very closed off, who's very much like, this isn't happening, I'm fine, this is whatever. He hasn't told anyone what's going on. And there's Perito. Perito. I don't want to say it with the accent in case I'm racist. But his therapy dogness has been treated as kind of a joke, because he shows his belly, "You want to rub my belly," and his the jiggly sound effect happens. But that allows that scene to play so sincerely, because he puts his head on Puss's stomach and calms him down, and it's such a sweet, quiet moment.
We haven't given any context for anyone who doesn't know what we're alluding to. So what we're talking about is the fact that there was a panic attack on Velma that was done poorly. And then they are comparing it to the panic attack that Puss has in this film, when he's afraid he's going to die. And how Perito's character, having his desire to be a therapy dog actually be more than just again, really utilizing what they've decided to bring to the table, like, in every aspect. It's not just something where it's a throwaway idea. It's something where he can execute this moment. And I don't think like they just said, oh, he wants to be a therapy dog, so this moment could work. But like the two interweaved into each other naturally. And it makes a lot of sense, and it works really well, and it's very thoughtful, and it's very touching. To me, arguably the most touching moment of the movie.
Yeah, I would agree.
And I really, really like it. I think it's really great. It's the part that emotionally got me. What I think is so wonderful about Perito is that he's this absolute spirit of innocence and optimism, which could have landed flat. And I was nervous he was going to be the kind of cute throwaway character from the trailers.
Yeah.
He's not, though. He's the thing that's like, it works so well in the context that both Puss and Kitty Softpaws are characters who don't believe that people can just care about other people to care about other people. Now, your mileage may vary on how acceptable that really is when you consider Puss post the Shrek films.
Sure.
Because I kind of question that. I think even this film makes me question it, because there's that moment early on where they talk about, is there somewhere you could go when he knows he's on his last life, and he, someone who would support you. And yes, but we won't talk about it, I guess. It's another reason why, to me, I think this would make more sense as just following up Shrek 2 if the implication was he had that one adventure, had some good times, and then moved on, rather than stuck around for Shrek 3 and 4, where he basically like lives with them for a while, because Shrek has kids and Puss is still around. So like that rubs kind of against this concept.
Well, just kind of going off of that, what's really interesting about that theory, I'm happy to have that theory because, screw Shrek 3 and 4. But like, and Puss in the first Puss in Boots is a prequel, so whatever. But like the idea that Puss goes through his memories when he's thinking about his life, and he goes through everything, and we see Kitty's Hot Paws, we see his mother, we see Shrek and Donkey in a what's it called, Hakuna Matata moment, and the interesting thing about that is that it almost implies that it's been so long that has happened that he has forgotten that he has other friends. And because so like I would buy that, yeah, he had Shrek, he just did Shrek 2. He had some fun adventures with Shrek and Donkey, and then he went off back to wherever this place was, and have more adventures. And it's been so long, the gap has been so long that he has forgotten to cherish those memories, which is why at the end of the film he decides to go back to Far, Far Away to look up his old friends, essentially.
Yeah, I agree exactly with what you're saying there, because it just I don't want this movie to feel beholden to the entire mythology of Shrek. So I'm glad that they kind of skirted the line of needing to do that. But it is one of those things where I'm like, Shrek 3 and 4 are weaker films, and so I support just not really trying to interweave them into this, because it makes more sense for a Puss in Boots who we saw in Shrek 2, a Puss in Boots who we saw in his prequel film, to be this like very I do things alone, selfish person.
Yeah, it
becomes less believable if I try to really actually think about Shrek 4, where Shrek and Donkey both have had children, and they've been around, so it's been years, and Puss is still around with them. I'm like, why would Puss leave that at that point? Right. And why would it mean so little to him in his own reflection about it? So like, or he wouldn't think of it when he's on his last life, kind of thing. I think it becomes a little tenuous of like, yeah. Because we're here at this point, I'll also bring up that another reason why I think getting on my bandwagon for like, let's retcon out Shrek 3 and 4. I'm pretty sure, and it's been since it was in theaters, but I'm pretty sure Shrek and Fiona moved back to the swamp. So they wouldn't be in Far, Far Away, because Arthur is in Far, Far Away.
That's right.
So I think we're just totally abandoning those two films.
Maybe. I'd be into that. Hey, again, it's been so long since the last Shrek entry that, like, you could just be like, you know what, just Shrek 2 exists. Don't worry about it. The Dronkies are now older. Shrek and Fiona don't have 8 kids because that's the joke. You can do whatever you want. I'm happy with that. Yeah. And if you don't want to do another Shrek film, although I'm pretty sure that the end of this movie implies that they are.
It feels that way. I mean, there's been threats that there would be another Shrek for a while.
Yeah.
So I think
And-
it's an inevitability. And then this has been received as well as it has. So I'm sure.
And you know what? I'm happy. I really like the scene when they're like, we're gonna go see some old friends and the Shrek theme is playing. I was like, oh, that's getting me. That's really
Yeah,
sweet. I'm really into this.
It was sweet. And in a way where I was like, you know, even if you didn't, I'm kind of happy to live with this reality.
Yeah.
That this is what happens. But it's probable that we're getting another Shrek film. Anyway, my point being, going back to Perito, why he works so well is in this version of Puss who has been so singular minded and out for himself up to this point, and confronting both him and Kitty with this character who genuinely loves people to love people. And the fact that it's a dog, just very smart. Again, like tying in what you're working with these animals, like it's more than just the fact that they are animals because of animation. They are animals, and that means something. Dogs love deeply and unconditionally. Introducing a dog character for Puss that loves him deeply and unconditionally really works for the story that they're telling.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I said that, I want to highlight Selma Hayek's Kitty Softpaws, because I think she was done also a disservice in the original, because I think she's kind of there to just be the sexy female rival, but also love interest of Puss, and not really anything more.
Well, like, Kitty. So in the first film, I do really enjoy Kitty Softpaws in the first film, because I like the idea that, you know, she was a cat that was declawed. She's working for Humpty Dumpty, and Humpty is manipulating Puss through Kitty. And so like I do like the character in that one, but I do think you're right that because she is mostly used by Humpty to manipulate Puss, and Puss is kind of projecting love onto her, she doesn't really have a lot of agency as a character outside of she was declawed. And she does get towards the end where she starts to she starts to turn. She's like, she starts to care for Puss. It's very classic kind of like that kind of like tropey turn. But it's still not a whole lot to work with. And so you're right, in this film she's given much more.
Well, and you're right about saying like it's that classic tropey turn, which is also super misogynistic. Because
sure.
Which was my point, is that like everything about, and I'm not saying like, oh, everything about Kitty in this movie doesn't revolve around Puss to some extent, because it does. But there's a lot more of her own wants inside of it than there were in the previous one. And I think that's what I really appreciate about it, is I feel like there's a lot more of her own character to this, rather than like a very classic trope of this type of female character.
Do you think Shrek was at the wedding?
Do I think Shrek was at the wedding of these two?
Yeah. The one that didn't happen.
You mean, no, I don't think so.
Well, I was thinking, what if that's the last time that he saw all of his friends?
I'm suspecting that there was only the church and the person, and then there would be them too. I don't think they invited anybody.
Well, he says
the context of, huh?
He says guests. There were guests.
I don't know who would be there. I don't think it would be the Shrek gang though.
The Shreks?
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Shreks.
Just the local cats.
Well,
because like they are defined, at least for this the context of this film, right? They are defined as singular entities. Yeah. They don't see either of themselves as having deep attachments, because they've both held themselves away from it.
Yeah.
Whether that's from like fear or distrust, that's what they've done. So again, like those later Shrek films might muddy those waters a bit, but like that is, for better or worse, how we have to kind of look at Puss and Kitty for this film, as people who don't really see a lot of other people as important to them, or at least as them important to those people.
So actually, one of the things that I really like about this film is that it is the wedding. Do you have anything more you want to say real quickly? Because I do want to talk about the flashback wedding.
No, please go ahead.
So the wedding is really interesting because at the end of here, you could just watch Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. You could, but if you do just watch Puss in Boots and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish as like a double feature, it's really interesting to see these two get closer together and become like partners almost, and then the wedding be the inciting incident that destroys their trust once again, because these are two people who don't trust easily, and they thought they found that trust, that love, and then Puss leaving her at the altar, and then we find out that she left, that she also didn't show up.
Right.
It is really interesting to me to see that, like, is a really interesting plot device to put these characters in such a distrustful place of other people. Like, well, I couldn't trust the person I loved the most. Well, I can't trust anybody then. You know, that's where Kitty is coming from. Kitty is coming from a place where, like, I thought I had someone I could trust, but then you betrayed me.
Right.
I thought that the wedding was a very sweet, heart-wrenching moment that served a really cool purpose for the story that we're telling.
I think even sharper and more poignant is her condemnation of him. Of she's like, I wasn't going to show up for that guy, the guy who only loved himself. I wasn't going to show up for that guy.
Yeah.
And I really do like the idea. I think that, you know, the way they take it practically literally, that Puss is a different version of his own self in this new life, because he is changing, and that he looks back on his past lives and he's like, these guys, I see the problem here.
Yeah.
I think it's what really works about, you know, when they tie it all together for the third act, the confrontation with Death, and like what I suspected was going to be the resolution. But I mean, I think it's a good one, which is where, like, the whole point is Death is coming for him because he doesn't appreciate the life. But if he cares about it, then he's earned the right to fight for it. Then he can have it.
Yeah. Because
Death,
what Death wants to do is end this arrogant little shit. Right? He's like, yeah, I'll fight you. You're always going to lose, though. Because he says, like, people have tried, people have never succeeded. Because you can't beat Death. At the end of the day, Death comes for us all. And Puss being here at the end, when Puss is finally confronted with Death once more and he picks up his sword, he's not picking up his sword as the arrogant feline that Death came for. And when Death recognizes that, he says, well, shit,
you're ruining this for me.
You're ruining this for me. Is like, I'll see you again, because Death knows, like, I'm coming for you no matter what. At the end of when you're done, when you're on, this is your last life, and that's it. I'm coming.
Well, pointedly, both Death and Kitty say the same thing, which is, I don't see that guy anymore. Yeah. I don't see the guy who was only there for himself and only loved himself. Yeah. That person's not standing before me anymore. And that's the whole thing. I really like the way Puss says, I really like the way Antonio Banderas delivers the line, I will never stop fighting for this life.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's driving him, is like, this is the one I'm here for. This is the one I care about.
Yeah. And you see, because we see there's a great kind of Hall of Mirrors scene where he's confronted with his past lives. Very Doctor Who, which I enjoyed. And he sees all his past lives at the moments of their death. And they're like, yeah, just be us again. Just do it again, man. And when he is confronted with them, that whenever he's confronted with them, Death appears and says, like, you know, and gives the whole monologue and, like, and starts breaking the glass. But what I mean, that scene is just is really interesting to watch, as like a, you know, we're trying to get Puss back. Like, these previous lives, they know that he's on a path to they know the path he's on, but they don't want him to go down that path, because that's the point of this Hall of Mirrors. It's supposed to entice you back to where you were. It's a challenge, right?
Right.
I just really like that scene. It's just, and I'll just gush about Death some more anyway. But
yeah. Yeah, I think that they're very thoughtful about how all these characters work together. We haven't really touched much on Goldie and the Three Bears. I really like all of them. I like the performers. Having Olivia Colman and Florence Pugh there is awesome. Ray Winstone
Ray
and
Winstone.
What's his
Oh,
name?
I want to talk a little bit about Goldie.
Samson Kayo. That's the last one. Sorry, Samson Kayo is the voice of the baby.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about Goldie's animation, which I really like because how she. So the animation in this one is not just has a 2D sensibility, but oftentimes has an anime sensibility. And the frame rate drops whenever they're doing action sequences, which I think creates some really dynamic sequences. And when
My wife hated it.
Really,
the drop in frame rate, she thought it was lazy.
Oh, really? I thought it was very, very fun.
Yeah, she thought it was lazy.
What'd you think of it?
Oh, I like it. We're not the same.
She has her opinions.
She's entitled to them.
She is entitled to them. How'd she like the movie overall?
It for personal reasons, it was probably not the best time to see this movie.
Sure. I hope she can watch it another time and hopefully enjoy it some more.
We'll see.
Someday in the future. But anyway, one of the things that I really like about Goldie is how she moves, how her animation moves, especially with her staff. The second time watching it, I was very enamored with two things. Everybody's eyes, I think, are gorgeously animated, and Goldie's staff moves in such a fun way. She moves her staff in such a fun way where she's kind of always twirling it, always kind of moving with it. I just thought that the animation there was stunning.
I'm going to say something that's going to make you sad.
Okay.
It's a shame they're probably never making a sequel to The Rise of the Guardians, because this animation style with those characters would look really good.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Why'd you do that?
I'm sorry. It's because when I looked at it, I'm like, I would really love The Rise of the Guardians probably if they all looked as good as like Goldie does in this.
Yeah, I really like Rise of the Guardians. I was actually just watching last night Kung Fu Panda 2. And we talked a little bit about off air about how the Kung Fu Panda films have been kind of begging for this style of animation. And Kung Fu Panda 2 has many sequences that are just 2D animated. Many of the flashbacks and dream sequences are 2D, and they're beautiful. And I think that like this animation is going to look so good the more they use it. But going back to older DreamWorks films that feel like now they should have had this animation, is going to be tough because you're going to be thinking about that. And the animation is still stunning for these films. I really like Rise of the Guardians, but like it's kind of a bummer that you kind of look at these going like, man, if only this was animated in such in as unique way as Puss in Boots. And thank goodness Kung Fu Panda 4 is coming, because we might get that.
Right. And notably, it's not just like the character models, but it's also, you can see it in the art behind Brandon or the art behind me. It's the background stuff too. It's so colorful. Yeah. It's so alive.
Very painterly.
It's so striking.
There's a scene, there's many background scenes when you first get into the dark forest. You see the background of like the clouds and whatnot. They have like streaks, like painter streaks. And it's just the fact that you were able to do that and weren't concerned with the fact that it's going to look like it's not going to look like a real cloud. Like, who cares? It's a cartoon. Right.
This looks very pretty, what's behind me, and it's not just Puss's model, although that looks incredible. But you can even see it in like it's on both of ours, but on Puss's hat, like the way the smears are on the hat and everything.
Yeah,
it's so cool. It just looks so. It's just so thoughtfully animated.
It's kind of a bummer to say it's a cartoon, because like that feels like I'm being derogatory almost. But like the cartoon medium, the animation medium. This is a great. There are two examples of what the animation medium can do that happened at the end of the year. Pinocchio, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Both those films prove that animation should be taken far more seriously. And I think that we're in a place where it's such an interesting place in animation with this new animation style, specifically seeping its way into other studios, finding its way into different animated movies, that I'm so excited to see,
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that, again, an example I want to cover of using what's given to you so well, is they introduce the concept of the Spanish splinter when they're fighting the giant in the beginning, which is an incredible opening and an incredible action sequence. And a lot of people have said this; it's all over the place, but it's true. And then to have that be part of how they defeat Jack Horner, not only is it a good callback to the opening of the film, but it's genius for the fact that, like, what Jack Horner's known for is putting his thumbs in pies. And the fact that you specifically went for his thumbs, I'm like, this is so smart. This is so thoughtful to who this character is and what you're pointing at. Like, it's not like, oh, that was the source of his power or anything, but it was like, this is a cute, like, thinking about what's relevant to this character, putting early in the movie this use of going into a giant thumb and then using it again with Jack Horner is so smart.
I think there's a lot of things that are smart in this movie, and one of the things that I want to highlight is the script. It's very trim the fat. There's not a lot of fat in this script. Yeah, and I do want to talk about the humor in a minute, but I want to talk about the script most specifically as it's structured, because it almost looks like the quest is to get to the Dark Forest, but they get to the Dark Forest at the end of the first act, and then then the Dark Forest is the second and third act. And I think that was really smart, because you spend more time in the Dark Forest and not just a singular path, because they introduce a mechanic that they use very smartly, very interestingly, of the map changes the landscape of the Dark Forest depending on who's touching it.
Yeah, I think that was also very, very wise. I did question, I'm like, why are Goldie and the Three Bears not also separate entities? But I get it. Like, you weren't going to show the different Three Bears maps, so you just put them all as one bubble. But I'm like, technically, the map should also recognize them as individuals. But okay,
right. We're just going to cut some time again. Trim the fat.
It's also another notable thing. If you're a person still trying to catch on if Death is Death or not.
He's not in the
Death
map
in the Dark Forest for a bit before he confronts Puss. In the mirrors, and we see the map again, and Death is not on the map.
Yeah, I noticed that the second time I watched it, I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah,
because he wouldn't register, because he technically he's not, like, he doesn't enter the Dark Forest the same way. He being this
he's
kind
there,
of,
but he's not there.
Yeah, kind of being this ethereal being, and so it makes you think that, like, anytime, because there's this great moment where, like, Puss is having this panic attack where he's like running, and like the scenery makes the wolf in various ways, like the tree branches make his face, or the rock formation make his body. Such an interesting use of that, and you're questioning, like, every time, is he actually there? Because once you clock on he's Death at any point in the movie, you're like, oh, he could literally show up anywhere.
Right.
That's why he walks through the star. Everyone else has died walking through that ethereal whatever the hell coming out of the star, except for him.
It's also already floating up into the sky at that point.
Yeah, and he's just
and he just walks on because he's Death, and it doesn't matter.
And it's such a cool moment. I want to talk about the humor in this movie.
Sure,
because I think this movie is very funny.
Yeah.
The humor in the Shrek franchise has always kind of been hit or miss, even in the good ones. I think Shrek 2 is a very funny movie. But this one, I think, has a lot of really good funny moments, and a lot of what I think were surprising funny moments that you just don't see coming. Like when Perito says a curse word and they bleep it out, and everybody in the theater does a double take. Like, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
Very funny. The tulips, when they eat the baker and he just leaves a skeleton.
Posies.
The posies.
The pocket full of posies, yeah.
I just gotta say, like, this movie has probably the biggest body count of any Shrek film.
Right.
This movie has a body count.
Yeah, it does.
There's a lot.
I'd have to rewatch to see if I really agree with that, but probably.
How many people have died in the Shrek films, though?
A fair amount.
Yeah, that's true. Besides
the dragon kills a few people in the first one.
Off screen.
No, it kills knights and eats Farquaad.
Well, yeah, Farquaad died. Okay, anyway, it's really cool to see that, like, there's a skeleton in this movie, and then when Jack Horner is shooting the unicorn unicorn horns, and they just pop into confetti.
Yeah.
This movie is brutal without being brutal.
Right. Yeah. Very, very funny, brutal violence, cartoonish violence. And it works. And it works completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like it. I think it's very well done in it and well crafted in its humor. I think Joel Crawford, who's the director, directs a fine animated film. His only, do you know his other credits?
I looked it up, but I wasn't. The Croods: A New Age.
It's the Trolls Holiday Special and Croods: A New Age, and those are his only other director credits.
I think this is better than Croods: A New Age.
I think it is too, but I still think like there's a lot of like, if you look at this and you look at Croods: A New Age, there's a lot of that same kind of like quick, good humor shots that are done. I'm thinking of like especially like when they turn into the women hair metal Valkyrie scream band, like that shit's pretty much in line with the same kind of humor that we have going on here. Now Joel Crawford didn't write this, but I do think like Joel Crawford directs a sharp animated film. A lot of credit for, you know, the whole team coming together to make these very stylized, beautiful action pieces. Again, like people are highlighting the fight with the giant at the beginning because it is an exceptional animated opening. It just is. It's helped a lot by the score by Hector Patera, which is a great score.
What else has he done?
That's a good question.
I want to see who did the score for Puss in Boots, the first one. Chris Miller was the director of Puss in Boots. That's interesting.
Sorry, Hector Pereira.
I thought so. Henry Jackman was the composer for the first Puss in Boots. Yeah, I like his music.
So this is, I think, I've seen a lot of the movies here on this list, and I think this is probably one of Hector Pereira's bests, because I've been thinking about in the opening song of the Fearless Hero.
Yeah,
that's a good song, and I've been thinking about that a lot. But I think about the part where Puss is charging on the giant, and we're hearing the chorus inside of it as he's doing it, and I'm like, this is so good. He's done Despicable Me, Minions, both movies. He's done the entire Despicable Me franchise as a composer.
Interesting.
Spy Kids, The Smurfs, Angry Birds, Please Stand By. A handful of live action films are here, but a lot of animated ones.
Well, I think this is a very good score. I think this is one of those cases where we're looking at a few creatives, a few artists, a lot of artists, frankly, coming together and delivering what is probably their best work to date. I won't say it will be their best work forever, but I think there's a lot of people who have done some things that maybe that I personally don't like as much, who came together and delivered, frankly, magic. This is a film that everyone involved should be proud of. This is a film that's firing on all cylinders.
Yes, I agree entirely with that. I think this is a really, really solid film.
There's a few Shrek cameos in this movie, and I think they chose the right ones, Gingy and Pinocchio.
Yes, I think those are sharply included.
Yeah, Gingy being one of his deaths, and Pinocchio being Jack Horner's origin story.
Yeah.
I think those work. Those connected to the Shrek franchise, because like if Shrek was in this film, I don't know if Mike Myers coming out would have been good.
Shrek is in this film.
Shrek is in this film, but only in flashback.
And the intro.
The intro doesn't count as in the movie.
Doesn't it though?
Yeah, I like the new DreamWorks intro, honestly.
I like it too. I think there was nothing like, even before I saw this movie, that when that intro came, when they announced that intro and released it and everything, and I saw it, I was like, yeah, they're definitely bringing Shrek back. Like they didn't put Shrek in that intro to not say we're bringing Shrek back.
Yeah, this is their most famous property. It makes sense.
It's in the right spot of the intro because it's their first. You know, it was their launch. It was their launch point.
Yeah, I mean, and they have Toothless and Poe and Boss Baby.
But Toothless doesn't feel that like Toothless is there because they're going to make more How to Train Your Dragon films. Toothless feels like Toothless is there because they're like, we know this was one like everybody like talks about and thinks about.
and we're threatening with another one.
We're not gonna see Megamind in there.
No, that's true. Although we're getting that show, which is exciting.
Truthfully, I think the bad guys are there because the bad guys are supposed to herald like the new era with the new animation style and everything, and that's why we open with them. Because I wouldn't say that's necessarily going to be one of their most like long running iconic films, but I understand why they wanted to put it there in the intro.
Yeah, I'd like to see a second one to that movie. Have you seen it yet?
Nope.
I hope you like it. I hope you like it. We're talking a little bit about Puss in Boots. It feels very much like similar thematically what Puss is doing to a lot of people have actually compared this one to Logan, which I don't disagree with, but I actually think Top Gun Maverick is a good comparison thematically. Kind of this aging hero dealing with his own mortality and learning to come to terms with the fact that he is older. He is getting older. I don't think it's a complete one-to-one, but I do see the similarities, and I appreciate them.
Yeah, I mean it's a Logan, a Top Gun Maverick, a Cars 3.
A Cars 3, if you will.
I don't know if I fully agree with all the Top Gun Maverickness of it, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but I think you were right to name those three aspects because I think that there's a lot of thematic similarities in all three of those films, and this one included.
Yeah.
While they're not entirely comparable, like no one would say that Cars 3 and Logan are incredibly similar movies, but there's a similar thematic presence that goes through the two of them.
Except everybody when the Cars 3 trailer came out was like, oh, this is the Logan of Cars.
This is the Logan of Cars. Right. And like Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, I assume will probably deal with similar thematic
I kind of hope not,
resonance.
To some extent, to be honest with you. Now we're really tangenting, but we did a little too much of the I'm old now. Sure. As like actual text in Crystal Skull. I'm like, I kind of hope the point isn't just he's old now.
Well, I'm thinking that we're probably going to deal with it a little bit more dramatically than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, because Crystal Skull was very much like, I'm old, and that's the humor.
I think that you can tell a story that's more about, we'll see with Dial Destiny, but I think it's going to be more about him being like, I'm retired, but I can do this one thing. I gotta help. Here we go. And it's not so much going to be about, but I'm old. I hope, because there was just maybe 3 too many of those in Crystal Skull. Skull that was closer.
Crystal Skull has a lot of problems. Hopefully Dial of Destiny has none of them. But let's get back to Puss in Boots and the Dial of Destiny. Shit.
I really like the Baker's Dozen, who are more than a dozen, but just constantly getting murdered. How mistreated they are. Oh, we didn't even touch on the Jiminy Cricket.
Yeah, that's very good. His triumphant moment at the end is so good.
Well, there's got to be like a good part inside of you somewhere.
Oh, I really have my work cut out for me.
Yeah, you're horrible.
He's just like, you're horrible. You're a monster.
It's my resignation. Like, very funny. An immaculate Jimmy Stewart impression.
Yeah.
Very funny.
Wonderful decision to do Jimmy Cricket as Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, it really worked. It was very, very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a great time with that.
Wow, I'm your conscience.
Yeah.
The Mary Poppins bag is interesting because Mary Poppins isn't technically a fairy tale.
Sure, but I mean, also neither is Jack Horner, so it works.
I know, but it was very funny that there's like, no, it's Mary Poppins bag because it's designed exactly to be it.
It's a nanny's bag. They have the umbrella inside of it. Yeah. I think it works because like I think the greater context of Shrek-averse isn't necessarily like fairy tales, but children's stories. And Mary Poppins is a children's story.
There was one more thing I wanted to talk about. I can't remember. I don't know. This movie is really great. I cannot say much more than that, frankly. Like,
I think the music is top notch and well done. Especially his own song.
Yeah.
I think the flair is there. The character models look great. The animation's incredible. The action's really good. The heart of the story is really good.
The voice acting is some of the best we've seen from the Shrek franchise.
And the imagination of the Dark Forest in general, like everything around the star, how colorful the star is and everything about it, and how it affects the forest and how vibrant those environments are, is so good. It's just so worth watching just because it's visually stunning.
And I think the path to the star being like the path that you need to take to learn that you don't need a wish, very clever.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was very smart. It's a good, well thought out fairy tale.
Yeah, because like, what's a wish gonna do for you that you don't already have? Like at the end, because Perito is the thesis of the movie. Like he's got everything he needs. What's he gonna wish for?
Right.
Puss is so demanding of more lives. I need more lives so I can be the legend that I can be. It's like, no, you can be the legend without the lives. You can still be Puss in Boots. Kitty always wanting someone to trust, finding that in Puss finally, and Goldie obviously finding her family and making me just tear. But man, when Goldie saves Baby from the death, that gets me, man, every time.
Yeah. I will say that I did find, like, with Goldie's support of the family, even at the early on in the film, like how they support her and how she interacts with them, I was like, do you really need people family? Like, is this really what will fill your heart? And I'm like, sure, fairy tale, let's fill that lesson, but like, I kind of expected the wish to be more. To be honest with you, when they were first introduced, I thought like something had happened to the bears or something, and she was going to wish to save them. But I didn't know what that was, and I never really formed a complete thought on it until it was revealed what Goldie's real wish would be. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's predictable. Like I knew that Goldie was going to her wish was going to be that she wants a real family, and then she's going to learn that she has a real family. But it worked for me. I liked it.
Yeah.
I like this movie a whole lot. Should we rate it?
Sure.
What would you rate it?
It's a 10.
It's a 10 for me as well.
Like for what this film is capable of, it's a 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
10 out of 10. Definitely. This is my favorite movie of the year. I want to see it again so bad.
It's a good movie, for sure.
Yeah. Maybe we'll come back together and review my other favorite movie of the year, Glass Onion. We'll finally review that one.
Yeah.
We never did.
Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, I think Bad Guys was showing that the animation was changing at DreamWorks, but I think this is the sea change for them, and I think it might be a maybe the beginning. I won't say it is, but maybe the beginning of a watershed moment for a lot of the major animation studios to be like, oh, we need to think about what we're doing a little more here.
I think so. Not to get too much into it, because I think we want to do it as its own Animation Station episode, but the idea that that there are animation studios that are doing this kind of hybrid animation to such great extremes. Sony was the first. Now DreamWorks. It's weird to say that Sony started this, Sony Animation, but like that, then DreamWorks, and now and if this keeps going, Disney could be left behind. Even though they were really the first people to kind of like get up to this animation and then give up with the Paperman and Feast shorts. But what I think is so interesting is that DreamWorks is in a really interesting place right now, where they could be approaching a new renaissance. And now I did look ahead to what DreamWorks is putting out this year. This year, they're only putting out a new Trolls movie. I'm not sure I'm into that. I might check it out because I've seen the first two. And my fiance, she loves the Trolls movie, so probably will check it out anyway. But the next year, 2024, is the new Kung Fu Panda movie, and then 2 other DreamWorks films. And I'm very interested to know what those films are, because I think I think that's where we'll probably see the fruits of this labor, right? Mm-hmm. The fruits of what Puss in Boots has delivered to DreamWorks and Bad Guys will be seen in 2024.
Maybe.
Yeah. And of course, we have Spider-Verse this year, which I think is so exciting.
I importantly, I think more and more in this animation space of changing what 3D can be and what these 3D animated films look like, and incorporating more 2D to it is going to be a trend we're going to see more and more, because it's been proven successful because of things like Spider-Verse and Pixar, or sorry, not Pixar, Arcane,
Mitchell's versus the Machine, Bad Guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a great time to be in animation. It's such an interesting point in animation history to look at. I'm very optimistic about the future, just animation as a whole. I think we're going to see some really interesting stuff come out of the pipeline soon.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, we'll talk more about that on a future Animation Station episode, which is exciting.
Sure. All right, that'll do it. We are, as always, part of the Fake Nerd Podcast. There's a ton of other stuff here. You can go check out our regular episode discussions. We just hyped up the year over on our main feed. And we're getting excited about all the stuff coming down the pipeline. We're very soon, we'll be talking about the Scream franchise in anticipation of Scream 6. We don't know what we're doing in this immediate week, but that's stuff to look out for. Over on Fake Nerds Watch, we're doing The Last of Us, and soon a Willow discussion is going to come out, so check out those things. Basement Arcade and Fake Nerd Book Club are all ramping up for releases later this year, so catch up on anything that you want to catch up on those. And Pause Menu just dropped its God of War Ragnarok review, stemming out of our original channel, so just go check out all the stuff. And we're around. Contact us. Let us know. If there's something you want us to talk about on Animation Station, we'll try. But I think we're just happy to be trying to do as much as we're going to do. So we'll see. Where can they find you, Brandon?
I am at BT McClure on Instagram and Twitter. I also write for AtomicGeekdom.com, write and edit for KaijuRamaMedia.com and CBR.com.
You can find me at Sparkz Witty on Instagram and Twitter, SPRKZ Witty. I write for nobody and for nothing. So you can't check any of that out. Sorry. All right. I think that'll do it for today. So until next time, we are now departing.